It's always frustrating when you're working with a tree and you're trying to bend a branch in order to make a design, and as you're bending it, the branch breaks. What do you do when that happens? Is there any way to save that branch? Well, unfortunately the answer is maybe, kinda, sorta. There aren't really any great options, to be honest. I'm going to show you one way to try to salvage a bad situation. It's not perfect, but it's better than throwing away the entire branch, which is usually what you wind up having to do if you break a branch. There are ways to potentially salvage it. You might even be able to graft a broken branch back onto the parent branch. But that's a fair amount of work. That's tricky and may not give you the result you want. Takes a long time and may not work in the end. So I'm going to try to show you a simple and dirty trick that may work for you, usually works in my experience, and we'll talk about the benefits and the limitations of it. So this is the branch that I'm going to be working on as a demonstration today. This is not a branch from an actual bonsai. This is just a random branch that I'm using for demonstration purposes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what happens when you're working with a branch and then what to do next. So as you can see, I've got this branch wired. I've got wire around this branch. So we're just going to pretend like this is a branch that I'm trying to design. I'm trying to design it by putting a bend here. And so I'm going to start bending it. I can hear it cracking already. So under normal circumstances, this would be when I would probably stop and not go any further. But sometimes you get no warning sign that this is coming. So if I keep going, oh, okay, I've broken it. Now what do I do? I'm in trouble. Well, if you can see, it's not entirely broken. It's mostly broken, but there's a little bit on the underside here of the bark and the cambium. Remember, the cambium is the green layer that is right underneath the bark. That is really the living tree. That's what keeps the tree alive. And that's necessary in order for a branch to survive, because that's the way that nutrients and water travel back and forth up and down the tree. So right now it's mostly broken. Most of the cambium has been destroyed up here where the break is, but there's this little bit under the bottom here that's still attached, which means that technically this branch up here, the top part of it, can still potentially get nutrients and survive. It may not be able to get enough, particularly if this is a big branch with a lot of foliage on it. It may not be able to survive with so little food. Basically the highway for food is so limited at this point that it may not support the big branch, but it may well. So let's hope for the best, and let's say that this is a really important branch to me in my tree and part of my design. I really don't want to just cut it off and throw it away. I want to try to salvage it. What can I do? Well, the easy solution is basically to do nothing. Okay, let's say I as I was bending it, I overbent it, it broke. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to shape it to where I wanted it to be originally. Okay, so I'm bending it back a little bit. Technically, I could bring it back all the way up to its original position and keep it like that. That would be probably the best way to try to get this branch to heal and have it be strong. But remember that we were bending this branch in the first place because we wanted a bend in our branch, and we wanted it as part of our design. So I don't really want to bring it all the way back to the original position. I want to try to keep it bent. So I'm going to try to reposition it to where I originally wanted it to be. Okay, so wherever I want it to be permanently, that's the position I'm going to try to hold it in. It's already got wire around it, and that's our saving grace. We don't want to remove that wire. The wire is holding it in place and will continue to hold it in place for a long time. Imagine that this wire is sort of like a cast around a broken limb. You've already got the cast right in place, right where you want it. So don't remove it. Leave it where it is. Next, we're going to basically leave it. It's just as simple as that. And what will happen is over coming years, as the branch continues to grow, it will expand. Trees don't really heal in the way that human skin heals. It's not going to repair over that break there. What will happen is that the branch will get bigger and expand, and the new tree tissue will kind of form around the break. But that will take multiple years to happen. It's a very slow, gradual process. So this wire will need to stay on this branch for years. We may be able to take it off periodically to rewire it, but it's largely going to stay right the way it is. And then hopefully, we're going to hope that within a few years, that this branch will become strong enough again with the addition of the new growth that we can remove the wire and it will hold its position. Now, because of the break, it will always be relatively weak right there. And there's nothing that we can do about that. We just have to accept that that's the way it's going to be. And so after we remove the wire, after it's healed, we're not going to want to mess with this unnecessarily, because that could re-break it again very easily. So now that I've shown you the basic idea, and you can see it's just a very simple idea, I'm going to show you an example of where I actually broke a branch in one of my trees that I was working on, and I'm going to show you the outcome of that. So right here you can see that this is a branch that I had been working on. I was trying to bend it. I overbent it, and this one split in between the two branches here. It was kept alive because there was a little piece of cambium over here that was not broken off. So all I did was I kept the wire on it. I wrapped the wire more tightly around the wound in order to keep these branches a little closer together, keep it firmly in place so that it doesn't break off anymore. And then I just sort of hoped for the best. And this has happened last year. And as you can see, this year the branch is still alive. It's perfectly happy. It's putting out new growth just like the rest of the tree is. And so my guess is that it will continue to thrive. Now, it is still very delicate. It's still only barely attached to the main branch there. So this is going to need to stay in place like this for several more years as it continues to grow and grow around the wound. One of the things I'm going to have to be careful of, though, is that I'm keeping wire on here for a very long time, and one of the things that can happen with wire is that it can wind up digging into the tree bark as the tree grows, which can create lines of scarring on the tree, and can of course damage the underlying cambium layer, which could also then damage the branch and cause it to die eventually. So the point is that if I'm going to be keeping it in a recovery state for several years, every so often I'm going to have to re-loosen the wire and then re-wrap it again, just to make sure that the new growth isn't digging into the wire and strangling the branch. If you work with bonsai for any length of time, this is going to happen to you. These breaks are really common when you're bending branches with wire. You just have to expect that it's going to happen, and that's why I'm focusing on that today, because it's just a real common experience. As I said, most of the time you're going to want to just get rid of that branch because the problems are that even if it does survive, it's going to be a much weaker branch probably for many years to come, and it may not even survive. So usually it's just an oops, and you have to try to make the best of it. But sometimes if it's a really important branch, it's real critical to your design, and you can't figure out a way around that problem, you can't redesign the tree around this mistake, then this hopefully gives you one way to potentially salvage a partially broken branch. If the branch isn't totally broken, if it's just fractured, so if like you hear some cracking noises, or you see that the bark is splitting, then just leave it alone. It will probably be just fine. But if the actual wood breaks and all you've got left is some cambium on the underside of the break, it's hard to say whether it'll survive or not. But I'll tell you, over the years, I've done this several times, and I'm pretty sure that almost every time that I've done this, just leaving it in place with the wire has let the branch survive. Again, it's a weaker branch for several years because you've got that break in place. But if it's important enough to you, this is one solution. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think.